Liam Spencer sat rigidly on the narrow exam table, his hands cold and clammy against the thin paper covering, as Dr. Patel's measured voice filled the fluorescent-lit room. The latest MRI confirmed what every weary night of pain and whispered prayers had suggested: his brain tumor had grown beyond conventional treatment's reach. No standard surgery could safely remove the mass without catastrophic consequences, and radiation had already delivered all it could without risking irreversible damage. Hope Logan, standing just beyond the swinging door, clutched Brooke's trembling hand, their faces pale reflections of the dread that pooled in Liam's chest. Time, as always, felt like a merciless adversary, slipping through their fingers as the clock on the wall ticked insistently. And then Dr. Patel spoke of an experimental procedure. A revolutionary neurosurgical technique not yet approved by the FDA, one that promised extraordinary precision guided by nanoparticle markers and gene-targeting vectors. It could eradicate the tumor cells while sparing healthy tissue, the theoretical equivalent of a miracle, or it could trigger uncontrollable bleeding, neurological collapse, or immediate death on the operating table. It's either our only hope, Dr. Patel concluded, eyes steady on Liam's, or our most terrible gamble. The room fell silent as the weight of that ultimatum settled over them like a shroud. Liam's gaze shifted to Steffi Forrester Finnegan, who had arrived unannounced, her designer heels clicking softly against the linoleum as she closed the door behind her. Her eyes, usually alight with creative fire, were now glassy with fear. She knelt beside Liam, brushing a lock of hair away from his forehead, and whispered that she would stand by him no matter the outcome. Ridge Forrester hovered near the doorway, stoic and guarded beneath his tailored blazer, while Taylor Hayes hovered just behind him, worry etched in her every line. Thomas Forrester stood at the edge of the doorframe, guilt and resolve warring in his expression. He had long schemed for a larger role at Forrester Creations, but now his ambition seemed hollow in the face of Liam's life-or-death decision. Even Carter Walton, usually so smooth and self-assured when negotiating contracts, looked out of place in the hushed gravity of a hospital exam room. The Spencer-Forrester clan, woven together by marriages, rivalries, and shared history, now found themselves united by a single, terrifying question. Would Liam opt for this untested procedure, this Crosshair's chance at survival, or would he choose to accept the inevitable decline and spend his remaining days cherishing every fleeting moment with his young son, Douglas? The seconds stretched into an eternity before Liam nodded, voice steady with a quiet determination that startled even himself. He would consent, but only if every available resource could be marshaled. The finest surgeons, the most advanced imaging, a medical team assembled from the nation's top research hospitals. If this gamble was to succeed, it would require absolute precision and unyielding support. Backup plans were drawn up on the spot, contingency protocols in case of hemorrhage, an adjacent suite prepped for emergency sedation, and a chartered air ambulance on standby should complications demand an immediate transfer to a research facility with even more specialized equipment. As the legal release forms were passed around, signatures trembling on the glossy paper, the undercurrent of fear rippled through the room. For Hope and Brooke, it was a betrayal of every maternal instinct to sign away the option of palliative care. For Ridge and Taylor, it was a reminder of how painful it was to wage war on the body of someone they loved. Steffi stayed at Liam's side, her designer handbag abandoned on a nearby chair, as he scribbled his name in dark ink, sealing his fate with 3 simple letters. In that moment, the Spencer and Forrester names merged into a single battleground, where faith, science, and legacy collided in a single, desperate breath. Word of Liam's decision swept through the Forrester Creations headquarters like wildfire. Designers paused mid-sketch, interns exchanged worried whispers, and the Fragrance Lab's bubbling concoctions took on a sharper edge of urgency. Bill Spencer, back in Los Angeles after chasing business deals in New York, received the call in the middle of a shareholders' meeting. He shut down the room with one clipped instruction: cancel everything. We're flying out tonight. Brooke, drained but resolute, arranged care for Douglas, entrusting him to Flo and Justin, whose fierce loyalty to the Spencer clan had never been in question. Hope pored over Liam's medical files on her laptop in a hastily cleared conference room, her brow furrowed as she coordinated logistics with Dr. Patel's team, scheduling the operating theater, sourcing the nanoparticle markers, and even tapping into her network of charitable donors to ensure no expense would be spared. Across the hall, Thomas convened a crisis meeting with executive assistants and PR advisors, knowing that the moment Liam's surgery was announced to the public, the Spencer-Forrester empire would face unprecedented scrutiny. "We need a controlled statement," he insisted, eyes blazing with a rare ferocity. "No leaks about the experimental nature of the procedure. We spin this as a proactive measure by a loving husband and father fighting for his life." In the boardroom's glassy depths, the Forrester spirit of image above all else warred with the Spencer instinct to tell the unvarnished truth, yet both houses recognized that reputation could be as fragile as a patient on the operating table. That evening, as a crimson sunset bled across the Los Angeles skyline, the Spencer-Forrester family gathered in the rooftop garden of Brooke and Ridge's Mediterranean estate, translators of grief and hope brought together by a single, fragile life. Candles flickered between clusters of white orchids and potted citrus trees, their soft glow reflecting in the tear-streaked faces of those present. A wrapped gift, a ceremonial cross carved from oak, rested on a stone bench, intended as a token of faith for Liam's bedside, and a prayer chain of colored ribbons was stretched across a trellis, each knot representing a vow, a whispered plea, a silent promise that no one would waver in the battle ahead. Steffi clasped Liam's hand, her heart laid bare beneath the layers of couture, and Ridge squeezed his son-in-law's shoulder, offering a blend of stoic strength and vulnerable warmth. Thomas clasped the cross with white-knuckled intensity, secrets of his own conflicts buried beneath the weight of this shared moment. Brooke, usually so unflappable, raised her face to the darkening sky and offered a raw, unfiltered prayer that transcended family rivalries, corporate strategy, and social pageantry. Asking for a miracle that science alone could not promise. Hope's soft voice followed, a litany of names whispered into the night air, weaving together every friend, ally, and casual acquaintance whose goodwill might tip the scales in Liam's favor. In that circle of muted candlelight, the Spencer and Forrester branches fused into a single lineage of survival and scheming, their combined hopes as delicate and resolute as the glowing wicks at their feet. Across town, Luna Nozawa watched the unfolding drama through a haze of envy and resentment. Her ambition to claim a seat at the head of Forrester Creations, once derailed by Steffi's machinations, now seemed dwarfed by the possibility of inheriting power should Liam not survive. She sat alone in her opulent apartment, the skyline glittering through floor-to-ceiling windows, drafting clandestine messages to a circle of investors who had shown interest in partnering. On the condition that Luna could seize control of the fragrance division should tragedy strike. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard as she typed and deleted phrases, torn between genuine regret at Liam's plight and cold calculation about the opportunity before her. Would she extort the Spencer family, threatening to expose hidden documents about the experimental nature of the surgery in exchange for a share of the Forrester empire? Or would she play the sympathetic savior, donating to Liam's cause to win favor and insinuate herself into the inner sanctum of power? The scent of potential profit mingled with guilt in her mind, each thought a gamble as perilous as Liam's upcoming operation. And so the fateful day arrived. At dawn, a convoy of black SUVs rolled onto the hospital's circular drive, spinning wheels throwing sparks on the asphalt as the surgical team prepared the operating theater like generals arranging a battlefield. Steffi watched from behind reinforced glass as Liam, framed by a halo of fluorescent light and tethered to a web of 4 lines and monitors, was wheeled across the threshold. His gaze met hers for a brief, electrifying second. His silent promise of love and courage galvanized her resolve to fight on his behalf, whatever the cost. Then the door slid shut, the corridor fell silent, and the family clustered in the waiting area, each lost in their private maelstrom of prayer, dread, and scheming for what would happen next. Medical staff rotated in and out, carrying charts that spoke of vital signs and synthetic markers, whispering about the unprecedented precision of the robotic arms now delicately carving away tumor tissue. One false move, one miscalibrated laser pulse, and the promise of a restored life could become a final farewell. In the hushed hours that followed, Hope paced the waiting room's perimeter, eyes never leaving the double doors to the OR. Brooke sat at a small table, head in her hands, while Ridge and Taylor exchanged clipped updates, each word a lifeline tethering them to a sliver of hope. Thomas hovered near the receptionist's desk, cell phone in hand, ready to spin any rumor that threatened Liam's image into a narrative of unwavering heroism. At precisely 2:47 p.m., the lead surgeon stepped into the hall, scrub cap askew and expression unreadable. The room held its breath as he approached, and then he met Steffi's eyes and offered the thinnest of smiles. The procedure was a success. The tumor has been removed in its entirety, with no compromise to surrounding tissue. Now we wait for his recovery, but the cell counts are clear, and the margins are clean. A blare of relief swept through the group, tears, embraces, prayers of thanksgiving. And in that electrifying moment, the Spencer-Forrester clan stood united not only by love and faith but by the knowledge that science and the human spirit could, at last, triumph over tragedy. Yet as they celebrated in the sunlit lobby, none forgot the cost of this victory. The inheritance battles paused but not ended, the fragile reputations teetering between triumph and scandal, and the unspoken understanding that in their world, the margin between miracle and disaster remained as thin as a single, trembling signature on a consent form. As the ventilator's steady hiss filled the hushed corridor of the intensive care unit, Steffi Forrester Finnegan sat rigidly at Liam Spencer's bedside, her designer heels set aside, her hands wrapped around his, praying for a sign that life still lingered in the man she loved. Hope Logan knelt behind her, stroking Steffi's hair and whispering desperate pleas into the sterile air. Brooke Logan hovered just outside the curtain, tears streaking her cheeks as she clutched Douglas to her chest, the little boy's innocent questions about why is Daddy so sleepy, cutting through the tension like a knife. Ridge Forrester stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed and jaw clenched, his tailored blazer a shield against the raw grief he refused to show. Taylor Hayes hovered at the perimeter, her medical training warring with her maternal anguish as she checked monitors and readouts, searching for the slightest uptick in Liam's vitals that might herald a recovery. Thomas Forrester, guilt heavy on his shoulders, hovered near the doorframe, torn between relief at the surgery's initial success and dread that complications would soon emerge. The room was alive with quiet terror until the monitor's rhythmic beeping abruptly flatlined, the alarm screaming into the night, breaking every heart present. The lead intensivist burst from behind the curtain, signaling the end of the battle that began at dawn. Ridge's shoulders slumped, Steffi gasped and pressed her face against Liam's, silent sobs racking her frame, and Hope's voice broke into a single, echoing shriek of denial that chased every last molecule of hope from the room. In that breathless moment, surrounded by the finality of death's arrival, the Spencer-Forrester dynasty fractured along fault lines deeper than any inheritance dispute or corporate coup. Liam Spencer, the devoted husband, earnest father, and reluctant linchpin of two powerful families, slipped away in the sterile glow of fluorescent lights, leaving behind a void that no fashion line, no fragrance launch, and no boardroom maneuver could ever fill. The news spread through the hallowed halls of Forrester Creations and the Logan Spencer estates like wildfire, igniting grief and machinations in equal measure. In the marble-clad foyer of Forrester Creations, Steffi's first act was to summon her executive team, her voice hollow yet resolute as she informed them that she would step away from all design duties indefinitely to mourn her husband and fight for custody of Douglas alongside Brooke. Hope Logan, her face pale but her spine as unyielding as ever, declared that she would represent the Spencer children's interests in every legal arena, vowing that Liam's legacy would be protected and his voice heard long after his body had returned to the earth. Meanwhile, Ridge Forrester retreated to his private office, the smell of leather-bound portfolios and Italian leather sofas now tinged with the metallic sting of loss, where he drafted a letter to the board announcing a temporary hiatus in showrooms and line launches. Taylor Hayes found herself, for the first time, unable to prescribe solace. Her proposals for bereavement counseling and corporate therapy were met with nods that lacked conviction, a reminder that in this world of glamour and glitter, grief remained an outsider. Across town, Bill Spencer seized on the moment, issuing a statement praising Liam's courage and commitment, offering to underwrite charitable foundations in his name, foundations that would bear Spencer's imprimatur as much as Liam's memory. Carter Walton, still reeling from his entanglement with Luna Nozawa, offered tentative condolences, his own ambition quashed by the stark reminder that power meant nothing without the breaths that sustained it. And Luna herself, hiding in the shadows of an anonymous motel room, watched the obituary scroll across her phone, the names Liam Spencer and beloved son. Devoted husband overshadowing her every thought. In her potencies of triumph and despair, she felt a stab of remorse at the dark extremity of her vendetta, but regret tasted sour when ambition burned hotter than any ember of humanity. The funeral, held beneath a cloudless Los Angeles sky that seemed almost cruel in its serenity, drew every member of the Spencer Forrester clan into a cathedral of collective sorrow. White roses lined the aisle of the chapel, the gentle flutter of ribbons echoing Douglas's small footsteps as he walked between Brooke and Hope, clutching a framed drawing of his father's favorite fishing spot. Steffi, dressed in mourning black with her hair swept into an elegant chignon, stood at the casket's head, her grief a raw, pulsing wound that no couture could conceal. Ridge and Taylor flanked her, their stoic presence masking the bonds of love that held the family together even as it threatened to tear them apart. Brooke delivered the eulogy with a voice that cracked only twice, flooding the pews with memories of Liam's gentle humor, his unwavering kindness, and the rare humility that had made him a bridge between families often at odds. Hope followed, speaking of a partner who believed in second chances, who had once devotedly courted her for the sake of stability, and who now lay still before them, gone too soon. Tears carpeted the marble floor as ministers intoned final words, and when the casket descended into the ground, each family member dropped a single white rose, the petals drifting into the open grave like fallen promises. In the wake of the funeral, the Spencer Forrester empire braced for a battle over legacy that would test every vow of loyalty. Without Liam's moderating presence, factions formed. Steffi, consumed by grief and determined to shield Douglas from custody battles, locked horns with Brooke over the rights to entrust him to Flo and Justin versus the Logan sisters' push for Hope's guardianship. Thomas, emboldened by his recent return from Europe, saw Liam's death as a void in leadership. One he believed he was uniquely qualified to fill, pitching himself as Steffi's protector and the heir apparent to Forrester Creations, even as Hope and Ridge eyed his ambition with suspicion. Bill Spencer, wielding both grief and opportunity, proposed a Spencer Foundation in Liam's name to fund pediatric brain tumor research, using it as a vehicle to bolster his own philanthropic reputation while subtly pressuring the Forresters to honor Liam's memory by embracing Spencer backing for future fragrance lines. The board of Forrester Creations, once split between tradition and innovation, now faced a choice: rally behind Steffi in her darkest hour or pivot to a new creative director. Whispers of Luna Nozawa's talent resurfaced, though her criminal acts rendered her a pariah rather than a promising protégé. Carter Walton, attempting to atone for past misdeeds, offered to bankroll Douglas's education and Steffi's legal fees, a gesture laced with guilt and ambition, a man who sought entry into the Spencer inner circle through charity rather than charm. Even Taylor Hayes and Ridge Forrester, bound by decades of complex love and loyalty, found themselves at odds over how best to guide their children through the morass of grief, power plays, and public scrutiny now swirling around the family name. Amid this maelstrom, Steffi retreated to the Forrester Creations atelier one last time before her hiatus, her sketches abandoned on the drafting table, her swatches of silk and cashmere untouched. She ran her fingers over the fabrics as though seeking the comfort of the life she once led: jet-set launch parties, champagne toasts, the embrace of a husband whose laughter had filled these halls. Now, the corridors echoed with silence, interrupted only by the hum of overhead lights. She paused before a framed photograph of Liam smiling at her across Douglas's crib, tears pooling in her eyes as she vowed vengeance on Luna Nozawa for the chain of events that led to Liam's final breath. Not legal vengeance, though the district attorney had already charged Luna with conspiracy and attempted murder, but a drama of retribution that would play out in Forbes-featured exposés, in boardrooms and courtrooms, in every corner of the fashion world that Luna had once coveted. Yet beyond revenge, Steffi recognized a deeper imperative. To protect Douglas, to honor Liam's memory by forging a future he could have been proud of, and to find a way back from the abyss of loss to a life that, while forever scarred, would still bear the imprint of love. As she swept her sketches into a portfolio, each design a petal in the garden of her shared dreams with Liam, Steffi Forrester Finnegan closed the doors behind her, leaving the world of fashion behind so that she might step into the truest role he had ever known, single mother, Guardi.